Good afternoon. I believe people are starting to sign in. I was just doing a test with the lighting. We're also the lighting technicians. Didn't work. So we're going back to the previous. Again, good afternoon. Welcome to the March LIAF, Landscape Inspector Association meeting. As you know, this is the fifth Thursday in March, also called April Fool's Day. It had to be moved. It had to fit where it fit, and I'm glad to say that our speaker was kind enough to adjust his schedule and make this happen. I will share a little bit with you on a personal note. The reason it got shifted is, unfortunately, my son and daughter-in-law, who we recently moved from Atlanta to Missouri, where we were going up to see them, came down with COVID. And needless to say, it throws a large wrench in everything. So, you know, concern as a parent and concern as a father-in-law and for their health and just everything was up in the air. So I really appreciate Lynn, Richard, Kevin, and you all for understanding that you know, family took precedence and we had to move this entire thing to today. And I'm glad to say it was April Fool's Day, so it kind of fit. On that same note, and yes, a little bit personal, but I would certainly encourage everyone to get the vaccine. You know, for all the obvious reasons, the only way we're going to stop this is for people to get vaccinated, et cetera, et cetera. But wherever you fit on a scale and what you think, believe, or subscribe to, it's an ugly disease that's out there. So I would really ask you personally and professionally to take care of yourselves. And I think one of the best ways to take care of yourself is to get vaccinated. So I will now get off that. What we're going to do today, we actually we're continuing with the 2 hours of education. One of the things that we have been able to do since Zoom, switching to a Zoom format, is to have multiple education, because we don't have the luncheon procedures and all those things. So what this month we have is a redo of was it January, I believe, that when Lynn was kind enough to do the nutritional deficiencies, but he was up in the Carolinas or Tennessee in a large hotel, and the reception was not suitable. So y'all missed out on a really good presentation. Again, Lynn was good enough to share his slideshow with it, so we did put it on the website. You could see it, but I've had a tremendous amount of requests from people to say, you know, we wanted to hear that presentation. And when we had originally asked Lynn, we said, because there's so much involved in nutrition and so many differences with monocots and dicots, palm trees and canopy trees, would he mind doing 2 separate sessions? And again, he was good enough to agree and do that. So what we've done is we've moved that second session to today. So Lynn is actually going to do both the monocots and the dicots today. We'll start here in just a minute. We'll cover it probably including questions through about the top of the hour or just before. Then we'll switch gears for a few minutes so you can take a quick break, use the bathroom, whatever you need to do. I've got a little slideshow I'm going to put on, and then at about 10 to 15 after the hour, we'll bring Lynn back to do the second half, to do the monocot dicot on the other half, right? So it should be a really good meeting. I'm very glad that we've got the number of people we do, and to fill in a little bit how it's going to go, the chat room is open, so if you have questions, please enter them into the chat box, and then we will pass those on to Lynn as we get them. And also, what I will be doing is asking a couple questions, because as the pandemic seems to be slowing down, we've got to determine, we being the association, how we're going to continue and what we are going to do moving forward. There's certainly some big advantages to the Zoom format for y'all, the people we can reach out to, the ability for guest speakers to address us. But you know, like a lot of people, we're missing that in-person time. Kevin, Richard, and I are, you know, here in person all the time, but it's not quite the same. we're really wanting to look to getting the association back together. So consider that, and if you care to shoot text or emails to me, that's fine. I want your all's opinion so we determine how we're going to handle this moving forward. Kevin, did you want now? Or you want to go? I guess
I'll go at the end.
We'll put Kevin on at the top of the hour. So then, without further ado, oh, sorry, one more. Those of you again for the chat, since we'll be having that about 15-minute break in between the hour, if you have something you want to announce to the audience, again, put it in the chat box. Let me know. I'll take notes, and we will put it, make it available to everybody during that break. All right. So Lynn, with no further ado, I will say to those of you who don't know Lynn, haven't had the fortune to know Lynn as long as I have, which Lynn I think constitutes about forever. I had hair when I first met Lynn. That's how forever it is ago, and that was 8th grade. I think the last time I saw my hair. Lynn is author of multiple books on nutrition, involving in nurseries, involving landscape. Lynn has been in this industry for a long time and made a huge impact on this industry. And the information he brings to us is invaluable. So I hope you all get as much out of this as I think you will. And without further ado, Lynn, you are on, sir.
Thank you, sir. Sharing screen. Clicking PowerPoint. Hitting full screen. Happy springtime, everybody. Can you all see that?
Yes, we can see that. That's great.
Okay, very good. Those are, I believe, cherry trees that I shot in Homestead the other day, and they just kind of said springtime to me, so I thought I would do it. As Bill said earlier, if you have any questions anytime, feel free to type them in the chat. You don't have to wait till the end if you don't want to, although we'll do it either way. Today we're going to talk about mineral nutrient deficiencies in South Florida trees and shrubs. We're going to do one on palm deficiency soon, meaning in about 45 minutes soon. And again, feel free to jump in with questions or comments at any time. We did this, as Bill said, in January. I was actually in South Carolina in a very cavernous convention center, and the reception was terrible. So thanks for having me back to do this. I have, for those who were able to see the previous presentation, I have added some things to it. So some of it will be fresh. Here in this slide behind the text, you see an iron deficient pin oak on the left and a normal looking one on the right. Those are nursery seedlings. I'm going to start by talking about soil for just a few slides. It all starts with the soil in terms of what deficiencies we tend to see in South Florida landscapes. Here is a soil on Palm Beach at one of my clients. You can see it's pretty sandy. It's maybe not the greatest looking soil in the world. What deficiencies we see in South Florida trees really relate to the soil conditions that we have in our particular areas, and relating that to the soil conditions under which these trees grow in their native environment. Sometimes they match up well, and sometimes they match up very poorly. So we will talk about that. As you know, South Florida soils are generally very sandy. They tend to be low in organic matter, often less than 2%, sometimes less than 1%. So therefore, the soils do not have many binding sites to hold nutrients. Our soils hold nutrients, or fewer nutrients, than most soils in the country, or in the world for that matter. Cation exchange capacity. A cation is a positively charged ion, and cation exchange capacity is generally defined as the ability of a soil to hold and exchange nutrients. Most plant nutrients are positively charged and therefore are cations. There are a few negatively charged plant nutrients, specifically nitrate, sulfate, and chloride. Stay with me here through this chemistry for a second. It's going somewhere. I won't spend a whole lot more time on chemistry with you. In South Florida soils, what binding sites we do have are usually dominated by calcium and by sodium. Therefore, it makes it often hard for trees and shrubs to find enough magnesium, and potassium for their nutritional needs. That's why these deficiencies are so common here in South Florida. And I'm about to show you a number of examples of that and a little bit about why you see what you see and what you can do to correct them. Other South Florida soil tendencies, we tend to have high pH due to large amounts of calcium carbonate in our soils. If you see a lot of shell in your soil, it's a sign that you have large amounts of calcium carbonate and therefore high pH. However, it's the carbonates that make soil pH go up, not calcium. In soil tests, you often see calcium and pH vary together, but really that's not quite the association. When you apply lime to a soil, I know those of you working in South Florida landscapes, you don't ever apply lime really. But let's say you were a nursery and you had low pH in your container media and you wanted to lime the soil or lime the media. It's not the calcium that makes the pH go up, it's the carbonate. Limestone is primarily calcium carbonate. Dolomite is, of course, a combination of calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate. But what's really going on is that pH stands for potential of hydrogen. And when you test the pH of something, whether it's a soil or a water or a chemical solution, a juice, whatever, you're actually measuring the amount of hydrogen ions and therefore protons in the material. And when you apply carbonates to a soil solution, they bind with hydrogen to form bicarbonate, which is HCO3. Therefore, by taking hydrogen out of the system, that by definition causes pH to rise. So to summarize that, when somebody applies dolomite or limestone to really anything, it's the carbonate that's making the pH go up by binding hydrogen. It's not directly the calcium or the magnesium. Okay, just a little more soil chemistry and then we're on to horticulture. If you look at the periodic table, calcium and magnesium are pretty similar chemically. The atomic number for calcium is 20. The atomic number for magnesium is 12. They both have a double positive charge, and they're both about the same size atom. Therefore, too much of one can induce a deficiency of the other. The calcium to magnesium ratios in soil matter, at least in low exchange soils. If you get into the muck soils out in Belglade and things like that, these ratios become far less important because there's a lot of binding sites there for calcium magnesium to bind onto, and there's plenty for everybody. But in our low exchange capacity soils that don't hold much in the way of nutrients, these ratios are important and can be a problem. Soil nutrient ratios do matter in my experience. I have seen more than 1.5 million soil analyses in my career. Most of you know, except for maybe Thad Bilecki, that I owned A&L Labs for 28 years. I'm picking on you, Thad. And I was in that business for 33 years. The calcium to magnesium ratios in soils are one of the ratios that I look at. If you studied horticulture in Gainesville, they don't want to talk about ratios, but I'm telling you that they matter, at least in our soils. If the ratio is greater than 10 to 1, calcium to magnesium, magnesium deficiency is likely in susceptible species. Some plants have very low magnesium requirements. Some have quite high requirements. To give you some examples, I have never seen magnesium deficiency in an oak tree anywhere in the world. They have very low requirements. However, when we get to things like Phoenix palms, state palms, they have very high magnesium requirements. So you're looking at the soil conditions in relation to what the plant needs, and that will kind of dictate when deficiencies happen. This is a slide I found not too long ago that I found very interesting. The molecule on the left is hemoglobin, and the molecule on the right is chlorophyll. If you look carefully at these molecules, you'll see that they're virtually identical. Hemoglobin is almost exactly the same thing as chlorophyll. However, in hemoglobin, there is iron in the middle of the molecule, which is why, quite frankly, your blood is red. In the middle of chlorophyll is magnesium, and that's why chlorophyll is green. If you've ever seen or heard about blue-green algae like they have in places around the state, blue-green algae has copper in the middle of its chlorophyll molecule, and that's why it's blue-green. If you've ever seen corrosion on a penny, it's a blue-green color. So what happens when plants run low? Magnesium is a very mobile element. When a plant runs low in magnesium, it will steal it from the older leaves and move it into the new leaves. We therefore see a lack of magnesium and thus a lack of chlorophyll in the older leaves, while the newer leaves retain good color. And you're going to see a number of examples of this in just a minute here. Let's start with some magnesium deficient tree pictures. The one on the left is a mast tree or polyalthia. I took that picture over in the Fort Myers area. You can see that the margins of the leaf are yellow and the interior parts along the veins are green. This is an older leaf. And what is happening again simply is the plant is stealing magnesium from the old leaves, moving it into the new leaves, and therefore you have marginal yellowing in that older leaf. And this is a real common problem in this mast tree. The one on the right is a Ficus altissima or lofty fig. This one has a lower magnesium requirement than some trees, but you can see again yellow between the veins. And if you look along that horizontal midrib going left and right, you'll kind of see the outline of a Christmas tree or a Christmas tree like ghosty look. And you can see the same thing on the mast tree on the left. You have kind of this Christmas tree effect where the margins or sometimes in between the veins are turning yellow, but the rest of it is green. All right, here's some others. This is a pandanus or screw pine. This is taken in the Miami Beach area. You can see yellowing in the older leaves in this pandanus, but green in the new leaves. The soils in Miami Beach are very, very calcareous and very alkaline. So the tree, even though it's somewhat native to this area, I believe, has to steal magnesium from the old leaves and move it into the new leaves. Again, that's why you have poor color in the older foliage and pretty normal color in the new foliage. The picture on the right was taken from an interior scape. This is a very old rubber plant that was in a driver's license office for like 20 years. And I've never seen a magnesium deficiency this bad on a rubber plant before. Normally rubber plants are not very susceptible to magnesium deficiency. They were probably fertilizing this tree once in a while with soluble 20-20-20 or 20-10-20 or something like that. We like to think those are complete fertilizers, but they're not. Most 20-20-20s don't have any sulfur in them. They don't have any calcium in them, and they only have a pinch of magnesium. So eventually, this again is an old leaf. The plant has to steal the magnesium from here in order to get it into the newer leaf. We have Fatsia japonica on the left. I took this picture in the Bahamas. Those of you who have hung around the Bahamas at all know that it's basically, you know, a limestone coral reef, and limestone is calcium carbonate. So we have a very severe case of magnesium deficiency in Fatsia here on the left. On the right-hand side of the screen is a Bolnesia tree. Again, you have the marginal yellowing to orange color in the older foliage. I don't really have the newer foliage in this image, but the newer leaves tend to be a lot greener and a lot better. And again, this really all comes back to soils that don't hold a lot of nutrients. What binding sites you have are dominated by calcium and or sodium, and therefore certain tree species have a lot of trouble with getting enough magnesium into themselves. I mentioned oak trees don't have much problem with this. Black olives don't have much of a problem with this. Cattleya guavas don't have much of a problem. There's a number of trees. Pines have low magnesium requirements, but other plants have very high requirements. And yet more. Here's a mulberry tree from Davie, Florida on the left. Again, you can see maybe more pronounced there, that Christmas tree sort of silhouette or outline where the veins are green and the areas in between the veins are yellow or sometimes orange or golden, and the margins tend to be lacking in chlorophyll as well. There's a Dracaena Draco on the right, again from the Miami Beach area. Those older leaves are horribly yellow, horribly chlorotic, and the new leaves aren't even very green. Once again, there's very calcareous soils there. And another plant with a high magnesium requirement are a few more trees that are magnolias. Magnolias will do okay in South Florida if they're planted in decent soil. But if they're planted in really high pH calcium, calcareous soil, they tend to give you a lot of magnesium problems, again, with marginal yellowing in the older leaves. And if you look kind of carefully at that slide on the left, you will see that the new leaves have pretty good color overall, but the old leaves basically don't have any chlorophyll because they don't have any magnesium. Magnesium's in the middle of chlorophyll, and so they steal it from the old leaves, move it into new leaves. That's why you have that color. Most bauhinias or Hong Kong orchid trees in South Florida are the same way, at least those that don't receive fertilizer or don't receive very much. That one on the right there, that Hong Kong orchid tree, actually has two deficiencies in it. The yellow veiny green look that you see there is magnesium deficiency. The marginal scorch along the edge in those 2 or 3 leaves, as you can see, that's actually potassium deficiency. And we'll chat about that more in a little bit. Once again, I'm being a little repetitive here, but I want you to kind of understand this. The plants are stealing magnesium from the older leaves because of low exchange capacity soils whose binding sites are dominated by calcium and sometimes sodium. You have little magnesium availability in the soil and therefore little chlorophyll in the margins of the leaves. People ask me, and I swear they do ask me, how can I lower the calcium in my soil? I tell them, move to Georgia. That's the only way you're going to do it. It's not that our soils are high in calcium. It's largely that they are calcium. How do we correct magnesium deficiency? What do we do about that? I just showed you 10 or 12 images of magnesium deficient trees in South Florida. One is to use kieserite. Kieserite is an inexpensive kind of impure mineral form of magnesium. It's pretty well slow release and long acting. And it's popular. I know the university has recommended it in the past in their Palm Special type of fertilizers. Another thing I like to do and that I recommend quite a bit is K-Mag, typically 2.5 pounds or so per 1,000 square feet under the canopy. K-Mag is a natural organic 0022 with 11% magnesium. A lot of times when you have a magnesium deficiency situation, you also have a potassium deficiency situation because calcium and sodium are just dominating everything. And so having 22% potassium and 11% magnesium is nice. You might say or think, how is that better than Epsom salts? Well, it's not much better than Epsom salts, but it has 11% magnesium to 10% magnesium for mag sulfate or Epsom salt, so there's not a ton of difference there. However, K-Mag will last longer. K-Mag will typically last 2 or 3 months, especially if you get the coarse grade. It's pretty cheap. It's about 20 bucks a bag. There is K-Mag in most landscape and nursery and turf fertilizers as a source of potassium and magnesium. Another alternative, if you prefer, you can spray and or drench Epsom salts, typically about 2 to 3 pounds per 100 gallons. That's a little shorter term fix, but it can be a little quicker acting, especially if you drench it. Now, some plants absorb foliar nutrients better than others. Plants like, say, ligustrum or zamia are terrible at absorbing foliar nutrients. Rhapis palms are bad at absorbing foliar nutrients. Things with soft, tender leaves without thick cuticles, things like impatiens, a lot of the shrubs with thinner leaves, chrysanthemums, poinsettias, those kind of things will absorb foliar nutrients very well. Whether you go through the leaves or the soil kind of depends. I generally prefer K-Mag, again, because it has both potassium and magnesium in it, and often you have dual deficiencies, which I will be showing you. Sometimes you may prefer to spray and or drench Epsom salts. It really doesn't hurt to do both. I think I said in the last seminar I did with you guys in January, I have never seen magnesium toxicity on any plant anywhere in the world. If you were to come in and go crazy with magnesium, let's say, all right, we're going to fix this magnesium deficiency. Let's give them 50 pounds of Epsom salts. Well, what you would do is you would get a salt index or a salt damage before you get a magnesium toxicity. So the salinity factor is going to come into play before any sort of magnesium deficiency would. So, you know, there you go. They also make magnesium chelates, which are fine. A number of companies in South Florida market glucoheptanate liquid magnesiums. They're normally about 5% magnesium, but they are chelated, usually again with glucoheptanates. You can spray those or drench those. Personally, I find that K-Mag or Epsom salts work just fine, although sometimes clients prefer the chelate, and that's fine as long as the plant's getting ultimately what it needs. Some other deficiency symptoms. Here is iron deficiency in the mast tree. This picture was taken at the same nursery in the Fort Myers area that the magnesium deficiency was earlier. The difference, basically, magnesium deficiency occurs in the old leaves and iron deficiency occurs in the new leaves. Now, in this particular situation on our left, we knew they were iron deficient. We had tissue analyses, we had soil analyses, and we knew they needed iron. So we started spraying iron. And if you look at the leaves on the mast tree on the left, you will see little green dots, what I call green dots of absorption. If you look kind of a little more carefully, see that sort of a droplet pattern on the leaf, where they sprayed chelated iron and the droplet sat on that leaf for a while. We got some localized iron absorption. There is no iron in chlorophyll. The plants need iron to make chlorophyll. So we got what I call green dots of absorption. Now, iron deficiency and manganese deficiency look about the same in most plants. And if you're really not sure what to do or what your deficiency is, you can spray a broad spectrum micronutrient blend. You know, there's Keplex, there's Brexel, there's lots of them out there. But if you see green dots like you see on the left side of your screen, that is absolutely iron deficiency. Iron is the only element that does that. So whenever you see green dots like that on a gardenia or a citrus tree or a mast tree or whatever, you know that iron is what you are dealing with. Iron deficiency is almost never a lack of iron in the soil. It's a lack of iron availability. What can make iron unavailable? Well, high pH, we all know that. High manganese can make iron less available. High phosphorus can make iron less available. Cold soils, which we don't generally deal with here. Soils that are poorly drained or waterlogged or excessively irrigated can have iron problems. Oxygen is essential for iron uptake. And if your soil available oxygen is not good, the plant will tend to take iron up in unavailable forms. On the right, we have a maple tree with potassium deficiency. Now, you might look at that and say, well, that looks like a fungus. Let's get our Daconil out. Well, no. And the way you can tell is, number one, again, looking very carefully at the slide, you'll see that the necrotic spots are virtually all in between the veins. Secondly, if you look to the left side of that image, those are the newer leaves. The newer leaves have good color and they don't have necrotic spots on them. When you have potassium deficiency, the necrotic spots will generally be only on the older leaves and the newer leaves will not have them. What's really going on here physiologically? One of the main functions of potassium in plants is it regulates the guard cells that open and close the stomates, those little pores in the leaf that regulate moisture and gas exchange. When you are potassium deficient, the plant has trouble closing the stomates. You therefore get localized desiccation in the leaf, and that's why you get all these little necrotic spots in those areas where potassium is really deficient. When it's hot or dry or windy or low humidity or salty or anything applying drought stress to a tree, the plant can't close the stomates and necrotic spots are going to form. Additionally, if it's really dry like it is right now, although I think it's going to rain this afternoon, if you drought stress a tree with potassium deficiency, the symptoms are going to get worse. And as I drive around town these days, I see a lot of that in a lot of the trees in the landscape. Once again, the plant can't close the stomates. Therefore, if you apply less moisture and drought stress the tree further, you're going to get more spots. Here is a Bradford pear. I took this in South Georgia. Again, you see necrotic spots more or less kind of the same size and in between the veins. If you look sort of at the upper right portion of that slide, you'll see a new leaf. It doesn't have any of those symptoms. That's not a fungus, that's potassium deficiency. On the right side is a guava tree in a grove in Homestead. And I think any of you have hung around the Redlands or the Glade soils down there, and you probably have. Those soils run about 10,000 parts per million available calcium. That's 1%, which is huge. And because of all that calcium, the plant can't find enough potassium. They were also under fertilizing this grove. If you kind of even look at the new leaves, you'll even see a few necrotic spots on the left side of that slide. And the color and the leaf expansion just aren't good. This is an underfed grove, and therefore pretty much all the plant can find to take up is, is calcium, and that's not a good thing. And some more. Here is potassium deficiency on Cattleya guava. This picture came from West Palm Beach. In the middle of the slide there, you can see again necrotic spots sort of uniformly spaced in between the veins. All right. Same kind of thing we've seen elsewhere. If we look at the new leaves, we don't see any spots, do we? Those new leaves are coming out. They don't look great nutritionally, but the new leaves are fine. And the old leaves in the sort of middle and upper part of the slide have a lot of necrotic spots in them. On the right side is a breadfruit tree, Artocarpus. Captain James Cook tried to introduce Artocarpus to the New World from the South Pacific, but he had a little trouble his first time around. He was on a ship called the Bounty, and there was a little bit of a mutiny on that particular voyage, and all of the breadfruit trees ended up in the ocean. But on his second try and his second time around, he managed to get breadfruit trees to the Caribbean. As I think you can see from these slides, a lot of times potassium and magnesium deficiency go hand in hand, which is one reason I am such a big fan of K-Mag. By the way, neither K-Mag nor Epsom salts are acidic. There is absolutely no acidity in either product. The calcium carbonate equivalent of both of those products is 0. Okay, manganese. Our soils in South Florida are generally alkaline, high pH. They're generally deficient in manganese. It's a very common thing around here. This is a Ficus lyrata or fiddle leaf fig in a landscape. This is actually at the Fontainebleau in Miami Beach. It's not the greatest slide, but you can see that the new leaves are quite pale and off color, while the old leaves have good color. That's exactly the opposite of magnesium deficiency. Manganese deficiency, Mn, chemical symbol Mn, manganese deficiency occurs in the new leaves. Magnesium, Mg, magnesium deficiency happens near the ground. So Mn, manganese in the new leaves, Mg, magnesium in the old leaves. And that's one way that you tell the difference rather readily between the two. The right side slide is a mahogany tree I shot years ago in Boynton Beach, Boca. You see the new leaves are extremely yellow. Earleaf acacias will turn this color sometimes, although that tree's not in favor anymore for good reason. Mahogany, of course, is a native tree, but it even can't handle our deficiency problems with manganese in the new leaves. You also very commonly see magnesium deficiency in mahoganies in the old leaves. I don't think I have a shot of that for you today, but the magnesium deficiency will occur on the old leaves. They'll turn kind of yellow or orange. And in new leaves in mahogany, they'll turn the color that you see there. And it can get really bad sometimes. Here is a ficus. This is actually the same tree, 2 images from the tree. This is one of those old-fashioned ficus trees. I think this thing's been there like 75 years. It's not the same strain of ficus tree that we tend to have today. But in the slide on the left, you can see there's even fruits on it. You see chlorosis in the new leaves there. Again, manganese, Mn, new. And in the older leaves, you can see that they're perfectly green and perfectly normal. And then on the right side, I have a close-up of a leaf from the same tree. It's not the same leaf, I don't think, but again, deficiency in the new leaves and problems in the old leaves. Palm Beach has pretty high soil pH and pretty low manganese availability. What I've recommended to these folks is to both spray and drench with manganese sulfate, and they'll probably have to do it a couple of times. It's a big old ficus tree, so spraying it's not going to be easy. You can also buy manganese sulfate basically by the pound in most South Florida garden centers if you just need a little bit. It's not a big deal, and you can put it on as a granular if that's easier for you. Sometimes drenching is not practical for landscape maintenance personnel, so you can apply manganese sulfate certainly as a granular. Iron deficiency is next. Podocarpus is one of those plants that tends to get iron deficient quite a bit. It shows up like manganese as chlorosis or color problems in the new leaves. Again, if you look carefully at the slide on the left, you can see the old leaves have pretty decent color. It's the new leaves that are chlorotic. This slide on the right is kind of interesting. This is an oak tree, again, in Boca Raton. It was a line of oaks. There were maybe 30 of them. They were maybe 35 years old. They were irrigating them every night for like 45 minutes. And that's why you see all the necrosis there. All that brown is from Phytophthora because they were overwatering. But what I also want to show you in that right-hand slide is the new leaves are quite iron deficient. Again, oxygen is essential for iron uptake. And if you're watering this soil 45 minutes a night, then you're going to have poor soil aeration in addition to high pH, and you're going to have iron deficiency problems. Remember also that the irrigation water in South Florida is almost uniformly alkaline. So if you're overwatering, you may well be contributing to iron deficiency problems just by jacking the pH up. What I told these people is, look, you ever drive to Tampa, you ever drive to Orlando, and you drive on the Turnpike or State Road 60 and you see all those oak trees out in the pastures that never get any water. Once oak trees are established in a landscape, they generally don't need any water. Why in the world are you irrigating for 45 minutes a night? I got them to stop that and we trimmed them back and the trees recovered. Some shrub deficiencies for you. That's manganese deficiency in a sago. That is right around the corner from my house. That thing has necrosed out like that a couple of times. When they get manganese deficient like that, they often get anthracnose as a secondary invader. So I'm pretty sure that this sago has both manganese deficiency and anthracnose in it. Sago is not a good absorber of foliar nutrition. So my preference would be to drench the soil with about 1 pound of manganese sulfate per 100 gallons. That won't fix those necrotic leaves that you see there, but it will help a new set of leaves come out normally. Calcium deficiency in bird of paradise causes a poorly formed leaf. They'll often twist and deform. You don't tend to see that too much in landscapes because we have a lot of calcium in our landscape soils. However, I see this a lot in nurseries where they just don't give the plants enough calcium. If we put calcium on this plant by either spraying calcium nitrate or applying maybe gypsum, which is calcium sulfate, to the soil, this distorted leaf that you see there will not correct. It's already basically formed and it won't form again, but the subsequent leaves will come out normally like you see toward the left center portion of that slide. Bird of paradise is another plant that does not absorb foliar nutrients very well. I would want to put calcium on the soil in form of a calcium drench or a gypsum top dress. All right, some more manganese deficiency. Clusia. Manganese deficiency is extremely common in Clusia. Clusia is a pretty bulletproof plant, but when you see a symptom like this on the left, and you often do, that's manganese deficiency. This is another plant that is terrible at absorbing foliar nutrients. Got a thick, heavy, waxy leaf that you just can't penetrate with foliar nutrients. I would be drenching that tree with manganese sulfate, again, about 1 pound per 100 gallons. Loropetalum, we don't grow that much down here. It's more common in Central Florida and the Gulf Coast. But Loropetalum is an acid-loving plant, and it has very high manganese requirements. When the pH is too high and the manganese is too low, they give you this color. The purple in Loropetalum comes from manganese. If you've ever seen potassium permanganate before, it's magenta in color. So again, I would probably spray these plants with both manganese sulfate. I both spray and drench them. These came from a development in Naples, in case you're curious. Boron deficiency in rubber plants. You don't see this too much in landscapes because you don't see rubber trees in landscapes that much anymore, but they really have trouble forming a leaf. And when it gets really bad, the leaf just can't form at all. I'll talk more about boron in the second lecture today, but both of these shots came from an interior scape in California, basically a hotel lobby, and low light also aggravates boron deficiency. I'll talk more in the second part of this about how we would alleviate this, but I've seen this a number of times in rubber plants. You know, one of the answers really for correcting boron deficiency is borax. Boron is the only micronutrient that leaches. It's the only non-metallic micronutrient, and it's the only micronutrient that tends to be anionic in soil. You could go buy a 50-pound bag of Cyabor if you needed some boron, but you know, you'll never use it all. You leave it to your grandchildren. You can go into Publix or Winn-Dixie and buy a several pound box of borax for about $5 or $6. Borax is 11% boron, okay? It's available, again, inexpensively in the grocery stores. You see landscape people out there doing this. I believe I popularized this. And the way that happened is I was working in developing countries where you couldn't get certain things. And I knew we had boron deficiency. I said, let's go to a grocery store. Maybe we can find some boron in there. And sure enough, bingo, in the laundry detergent section, there it was. So we started putting it out on boron deficient trees and palms, and they straightened out very quickly. Typically, you want to top dress with about a half a teaspoon on a palm or about a teaspoon on an average sized tree. I know that doesn't sound like much, but boron is a micronutrient. You don't need a lot. Don't get cute with boron because boron toxicity is very common. I've been an expert witness in maybe 8 boron toxicity cases. Be very sparing with boron, with borax, and only put it out maybe twice a year. Some more shrub deficiencies. Again, there's some manganese in clusia, although it's less severe. That little necrosis right there is thrips injury. Thrips is another problem that clusia get. A problem I've been seeing for the last year or so, but not commonly, is they get Phytophthora root and stem rot. The clusias just look terrible. They look wilted. They look like they want to die. There's Phytophthora in there. And every time I've analyzed that, that's what I always come up with. Here's a coffee plant on the right. We don't really grow coffee here because the soils are too alkaline. Coffee is perfectly happy with a pH of 4 or even in the 3s, but we don't have that availability to offer them, that much here. Again, I would probably K-mag this and maybe spray potassium nitrate at 1.5 pounds per 100 gallons. These necrotic leaves are not going to fix. What you've got to do is give proper nutrition to the subsequent leaves and they'll come out much more normally. A few more deficiency symptoms. Here again is a slide I guess I showed you earlier with both magnesium deficiency and potassium deficiency along the margins in a Hong Kong orchid. Again, I would K-mag this tree. You could also drench with potassium nitrate and magnesium sulfate if you chose. This symptom is real common on Nora Grant on the right, where you have those blotches. That is not a disease. It's not a fungus. It's not a bacterium. It is a combination of phosphorus and potassium deficiency at the same time. You often get this in the winter, and you often get it in calcareous soils. Your simple remedy is to spray with soluble 20-20-20, about a tablespoon per gallon, or about 2.5 pounds per 100 gallons. The leaves with the red spots, those spots will not turn green, but the subsequent leaves will come out normal, and after a while, you'll have a normal looking Nora Grant shrub. Couple more, Garcinia. You see a lot of these in Palm Beach and various places because they're salt tolerant. That is iron deficiency in Garcinia. There is iron deficiency in ligustrum. You may know that sequestrine 138 or the EDDHA iron sources are more available at high pH than a lot of the other iron sources are. But 138 has always been expensive, about 5 times expensive as 330. I'm not touting anybody, but Harold's has a new one called Sequestar, Sequestar. That is also a 138 chelate that stays available very nicely in high pH soils, and it's even cheaper than sequestrine 330 iron. So if you want a good available iron for calcareous soils that won't cost you an arm and a leg, Sequestar is a very nice product. A few other deficiencies: iron deficiency in bird of paradise. Again, you have kind of a veiny chlorosis in the new leaves. Once again, bird of paradise is not a good foliar absorber. I would be drenching with Sequestar or something like that. There are some good granular iron products out there as well that work very well if drenching is impractical for you. Maybe you can't get at it or you don't have the equipment to drench, but there are some good granular iron products out there as well that I like a lot. This is sulfur deficiency in the right on Boston fern. Boston fern has very low micronutrient requirements, but when sulfur is low, they have trouble forming those little frondlets that you see coming off the midrib there. They get all distorted. This is really quite common in some places in Boston fern. What do we do here? Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate. Spray and or drench with Epsom salts and you'll fix that problem. The distorted leaves won't fix, but the subsequent leaves will be fine. Just a few more and I'll let you go for a break. This is phosphorus deficiency in viburnum. This shot came from a very famous theme park in the Orlando area, who I won't mention, but you understand what I'm not saying. And they got off using phosphorus completely. After a couple of years, what do you know? Phosphorus deficiency. It shows up as a reddening in the middle to older leaves, and that's what phosphorus deficiency looks like. If you notice, it looks kind of like the red blotches you see in Nora Grant as well, which is also related to phosphorus deficiency. This is a pongam tree with magnesium deficiency on the right. Not one of my favorite trees. They don't look bad, but they're very messy. And, you know, they're not my favorite tree, but they get magnesium deficient as well. Thanks for tuning in, homies. There's my homage to Bernie there in the thing there. And you guys didn't have any questions this afternoon. Can I take any?
Yep. Hey, Lynn.
Yes, sir.
Well, wait, we're adjusting some things so we get everybody positioned.
Okay.
Whoops, there we go. Lynn, that was fantastic. Yes, there are questions that we're going to have for you, but I think we'll probably hold them because they're in general nutrition.
Okay.
That was fantastic.
However you guys want to do it, I'm cool.
Okay. Your understanding, your depth of this is amazing, and I got to tell you,
Right.
I don't know how. And you just kind of, it rolls off so fluently. We're all just absolutely amazed, absolutely amazed.
All right, well, thanks, guys.
Stop sharing.
So, oh yeah, so you can stop sharing your video, Lynn.
Okay, and I'll put up the next one, and you'll have your business meeting, and you call me. Is that the plan?
Yeah, what we'll do, it's about 10 till. So what we're going to do is we've got a couple things to cover in the business. So maybe 5 minutes after, so 15 minutes.
Whenever you're ready. I'm ready to go when you are. So I'm gonna stop share and start the other presentation, and I'll wait for you.
Excellent.
Okay, great.
All right.
Stopping now.
Thank you.
There we go.
All right, very good. So is that you in the
That
Lord
is
be
me.
there, Kevin? First of all, I'm gonna turn it over to Kevin for a minute. He's got a couple of quick announcements to make, and then we're going to do a PowerPoint kind of quiz for y'all, and then we'll start up again with Lynn at 5 minutes after. So if you need to take this opportunity to run to the restroom or do something, you're on. But Kevin, you're up now. So.
All right. Hi there. Let's move this camera back down. Oh my God, my head is gigantic. Yeah, I know. Okay, real quick, we are very, very close to our next certification, our virtual certification. We had a review session last night. We went over grades and standards things, but Mike Orphanides has been generous enough to offer up doing it again. So as such, I just want to put it out there again to any members who are interested in the certification exam, or if you've taken it and there's domain that you need to retake. Again, this may be a great opportunity for you to jump in on that. Shoot me a note at exam@landscapeinspectors.org and we'll try to work you in. But the core exam is slated for April 9th, and we will likely have another quick review session on grades and standards prior to that. So again, thank you very much. Good luck, everybody. I'm going to hand it back over to Mr. Burns.
All right, just a couple more things as far as the business end of it. Those of you that are not yet certified landscape inspectors, what are you waiting for? Kevin and Mike and that whole committee has made this a very slick program. They have greatly improved the education that goes on, and the association, I'm proud to say, has a very good acceptance in the green industry right now. So we strongly encourage you to get your certification, to stay certified, so that we can, as an association, move everybody forward. And that's where we're gonna help out each other. We're a very good, strong force in the industry. We need just additional people doing good work so that the word continues to get out there. Also, in dealing with the association, yes, this is the March meeting, but it's so the first quarter is done. If you have not yet paid your dues, we really need you to do so. We need you to come on board so that we can keep doing these meetings and we can keep all the expenses of the association in check and balance, so we can continue to come to y'all. I did speak yesterday with ISA, and they are going forward with the ISA seminar. Kevin, do you remember what city it's in?
Oh God, I have no idea. I didn't see that yesterday.
Bonnie Marshall told me yesterday. I forget. Please, if we would encourage, obviously, ISA. We have a wonderful relationship with ISA. If certified members are going to be going, please reach out to me, because LIAF wants to have a presence up there. And in addition, they have offered us booth space. And if we do that, we would ask some of the certified members to help us put together a good booth up there. All right, Kevin, if you would start the, okay.
Yes.
So I know some of you have snuck away and you're using the restroom or whatever, but I have, good, almost, hey. Okay, I guess I'm gonna have to sit down for this one so I can push the button.
Yes.
All right. How come I don't have hair in my head?
I don't know. It's a mystery.
Okay, so you're gonna have to, chat box, because they're gonna, or Rich, are you gonna read the chat answers?
Because you're the only one that can see it.
Oh, can you put my chat box on?
Yeah. Where's?
There we go, first one.
Where is it?
Somebody stole the chat box, give it back.
Why would they do that?
Yeah, where the hell is it? Okay, how do I minimize this?
Escape.
Oh, I hit.
And escape. It's always comforting to know when an IT specialist is having problems with the computer.
It was hiding.
Makes those of that problems daily feel very good.
No, you know what it is? It was hiding somehow. So I think what you gotta do is, so you're gonna do this, right? This is a flaw in PowerPoint because we can't.
There it is. Yeah, just leave
Yeah,
it right there.
but the
That's
problem is the second you try to advance the slide, you're gonna lose it.
fine. Let's see. We're gonna advance the slide.
You can't, you're not in the slide.
We're not gonna
Go
advance
back
the
here.
slide.
Okay. Okay, you know what? Let's make this easy for everybody.
I'm not sure what that means, so hang on. You're making everybody a host?
No, I'm making myself the host so I can see the chat box.
That would have really been interesting.
Everyone's a host.
All right.
Now I should be able to see
So I'm gonna shrink that,
everything and you.
try and advance, and I can't advance.
Okay, now I can see everything and you can't. There you go. So now you can go back to the slide. Don't worry about the chat window, I got it.
So how do I advance
You
my
have to
slide?
click into the PowerPoint. You're in Zoom right now. No, yeah, click right there. That's good. Okay, well, close enough.
Okay, we are there. See, Lynn, You're not the only one that has difficulties. And that was an IT specialist, by God. But he got us through it. So that's the important part. That we all end up figuring out that somebody who knows what they're doing can get us through it. All right. So for those of you, the only way you're going to be able to answer these is via the chat box. This is a pretty much basic 101. So what we're going to do is we're going to name the parts of the tree from the outside moving towards the middle. Now, when I did this, I did not have these as blown up as they are now. So those arrows are not exactly where they kind of should be. Like we're going to start at the top. So that first arrow is the outermost portion of this tree trunk, the absolute outermost portion that would even be seen from the outside. So Richard, have we got answers flowing in like crazy?
Not yet, I got one.
And what does it say?
Bark,
Who's it from?
Leah.
Leah Davis. Hi, Leah. Yes, indeed. The bark. All right, you get how this goes. Very easy. So moving in from the bark. Moving in from the bark. What's the next thing we hit?
Waiting for answers.
Mm-hmm. All right, Enrique, Mark, Teresa.
I got it from December. I have xylem.
From December, we had phloem.
No, xylem.
Sorry. But yes. I think we'll blame it on Richard. He misread that. Okay. The two words look a lot alike. Moving in, we have the phloem, right? After the phloem. Now it should be on that little bitty line that would be the differentiate between the light and the darker color.
Enrique has cambium.
Good job, Enrique. Good job. Okay, so now we're on the other side of the cambium towards the wood. It's a little bit lighter. It's not yet totally dark and non-functioning.
December has sapwood.
Xylem. Which December I'm going to bail out Miss December because I think so highly of her. Look at the next one, which is actually showing a region, and that's what we called out as sapwood. So you're correct, Dee. You're correct.
It's that same area.
It is the same area. And then when you move past the sapwood portion of the xylem that is no longer functioning, that is called?
I got Leah with heartwood.
Heartwood. The ladies are saving us. All right, so the heartwood, very good. Nice cross section. Those are the different parts. What we're going to do now is what are the functions? Same thing as you move towards the middle. What are the functions of each one of those? So remember what the first one was. It was bark. What is the function of the bark?
Talk to dogs.
Richard says it's how dogs communicate.
Enrique said protection.
Good. So indeed. Whoops. Uh-oh, why did it move back towards the? Oh, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to push it. There we go. So the bark was to protect the tree. And you're right. The bark being on the outside is able to tolerate the weather. The sunlight helps to moderate some of the temperature. Rainfall, wind that's coming at it. It's protecting all those live parts of the tree from the hostile environment on the outside, right? All kinds of different barks, pseudobarks from palm tree, thicker bark, corky bark of oaks, thinner bark trees like a gumbo limbo, but the bark still has that same function. So moving in December, what's the next one in from the bark?
Cambia.
I don't think December answered that.
No, that's what it sounds like.
The phloem, all right? So we talked about the phloem. Now we're getting into the live parts of the tree and some of the super important parts. So what is the function of the phloem?
Just for the record, December is blaming everything on your graphic.
I accept that blame. I accept that.
She
Yes.
says it's to conduct water and nutrients.
So transport the simple sugars of the tree. All right. So if you think of this as an elevator, this is the downward portion. So it's bringing bringing the simple sugars that were done in the leaves down the tree.
Explains the sap.
All right, well, it's similar. It's similar. You know, the phloem is extremely, obviously extremely important, because if you think about the overall, if we do the kindergarten version of a tree, where we say there's 4 basic parts of a tree that a child would draw, hopefully they would realize that below ground there are roots, above ground the trunk or stem, then we would have the canopy or the leaves. I'll throw this one up top. So if we've got root, stems, and leaves, what's the main 4th part of a tree? It's not the squirrel that the child would draw in the hole in the thing. Anybody got an answer, Richard?
December said bark, branches.
Nope. Root, stems, leaves, and
I have a guess.
Henry. Go ahead, Richard.
Leaves.
No, root, stems, leaves. You need.
December just said flower.
There we go. Root, stems, leaves, and flowers. So flowers are in charge of the reproduction portion. But the other 3, the root, stems, and the leaves, have to take care of each other. There's a root to crown ratio. So the more roots you have out there picking up water and dissolved nutrients, the more they can move up the portion of the tree that we haven't covered yet, talking about going up to the leaves, where in the leaves they undergo photosynthesis. The photosynthesis is the food for the plant. The simple sugar, photosynthate, sorry, photosynthesis is the process. The photosynthate are the simple sugars that are produced. Now, if they're produced in the leaves, what about the roots? They've done their job. They picked up the water and the dissolved nutrients, which a lot of people would say they picked up the water and the fertilizer. You know, we fed the plant. Well, as Lynn has been going through, you can identify the individual elements that are the problem, that are not being fed to the leaf, but the overall food comes from the photosynthesis and the simple sugars from the process of photosynthesis. So we produced in the leaves, it has to get disseminated through the entire plant. Hence the phloem, that's where the simple sugars get put into, and now the roots get fed. For those of you that own a company, it's a lot like saying, I send a crew out to mow a lawn or to trim trees or whatever it is. Well, they're out earning the money, but they don't get rewarded until you, who get paid from the contractor, turn around and write the check and pass it on to them. So you have to close that loop. That's what the phloem is doing. The phloem is bringing that material down from the leaves to disseminate throughout the rest of the plant. Okay. Now we said beyond that, what was next inside the phloem? That right on that little line, even though the arrow is not exactly on that line, which we said was the cambium.
Cambium. Yep.
What's the function of the cambium? Richard, you're on.
I'm waiting for anybody to come up with something.
Now, all the people we've got out there, all the smart people we've got.
I mean, at least December's trying to answer, even though she's at about 20%. Enrique says produce phloem and xylem.
Nice, nice. Okay, so you can look at it as the baby maker. It produces new cells. So the cambium is where all that growth is going to occur. Remember, that's the difference, and Lynn could cover any of this better than we are, but that secondary growth that dicots have is coming from the cambium. So the division of cells, it just depends on which side of the cambium the cell is produced. If it's produced to the outside, it's the phloem. If it's produced on the inside, it's xylem. So we go all the way back to the bark. You know, we say, let's say a tree gets hit by a car, or in a lot of cities, and Sunrise would certainly have to include ourselves as one. If we have people that want to kill a tree, what's the sure way to kill a tree? Yep, you know, you can do copper nails is one old thing they say works. You could try a chainsaw at 4 inches. That's pretty effective. Or all you have to do is with a machete or anything else is cut around the tree. Now, if you just cut off the bark, you'll probably damage the tree, but you won't yet kill the tree. If you get to the cambium and impact the cambium all the way around, the tree is done. The tree is done, which is why we have so many problems with people leaving ties and things on trees. And as the secondary growth of the tree expands, that tie can choke off the cambium. And if you choke the cambium off, the tree is gone. All right, so I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit, but you were right. Good job, Enrique. So next we said the xylem. What's the function of the xylem? Mr. Richard?
Nothing so far.
Henry, I know you're out there. Who else is out there? Leah, you're out there. Jason, Brandon.
December says conduct water and nutrients.
There we go. So the xylem is the up part of that elevator. That's where the roots are picking up the water and dissolved nutrients. They're putting them into the xylem to go up throughout the tree. Look at the difference and this is representative. Look how much bigger the xylem is. Remember, for ring porous trees, you know, the old idea that you can tell the age of a tree by counting the rings, which is really just how close together the cells are. The cells that are produced in wintertime or cooler weather or non-growing time. It could be drought, it could be anything. Those cells are placed very close together, so the appearance from the outside looks darker, looks like a ring. And in the spring or in the good growing time, those cells are spaced further apart, so we get a lighter color. That opposite of that difference is what we quote call a ring. So look how much bigger. We can go all the way back on the tree to the beginning of the tree, looking at the xylem. But the cambium is much smaller. Where's the cambium going? The cambium is being crushed and recycled. The xylem is not. The xylem is not. All right, the sapwood, which we said was next. Sapwood is the active portion of the tree. That is where the material is still freely moving. Sorry, Lynn, I'm going to pick it up so I can get right back to you here. So that is where the material is more actively moving. Because, excuse me, because over time, some of those pores clog and get old, they no longer are able to transport the materials. So once they stop transporting, they become heartwood. So the heartwood is still there. It's not crushed and recycled as it would be if it were in the phloem. It's still present. And what does it do? Why, it still supports the tree. So there is still an ability to bear weight on the sapwood, but on the heartwood, but it is not right. It is not actively moving any materials back and forth.
It's like a retired.
Yes, like a retired landscape
The tree is
inspector.
supporting it.
All right, Kevin, if you want to, so Lynn, we are going to roll this back over to you. Hopefully everybody's refreshed and ready and got their thinking cap on, because that was a very basic, and you're going to give them the PhD version of this. So.
Back on, so Lynn's back on.
All right, so Lynn's going to share screen, right?
Yeah, I hit share screen. I am pulling up the PowerPoint. There it is.
Okay, now you just have to start it.
I think you're on.
But I need to get to full screen, right? Or don't I?
No, you just have to hit the start thing that we talked about. Yeah, up, yeah, that one right there.
That one, yeah. Whoops, I went to the second slide. Anyway, going back one real quick. Deficiency symptoms in palms presented to LIAF April 1st, 2021. Today is the first day of baseball season. And Yogi Berra said, if the world were perfect, it wouldn't be. So just think about that. This is where we all ought to be right now. I don't know what's wrong with us, but this is where we ought to be. Here's a Robellini with 11 heads on it. This is not a nutrient deficiency. This is a genetic freak of nature. This palm at one time had 18 heads on it. Several have been broken over time. I know where there's a queen palm with 4 heads on it in Boca, and there's some weird things going on out there. Okay, nitrogen deficiency. This slide is blurry, and I apologize for that, but this is nitrogen deficiency. If you remember from the last presentation, there is nitrogen in chlorophyll. There's actually 4 nitrogen atoms in chlorophyll, and when they get deficient in nitrogen, they look like this. These palms are honestly probably deficient in everything. I think I took this in San Diego, and these are just like the yellowest palms you ever saw. I call it legal pad yellow. Here is nitrogen deficiency on Areca palm in Hawaii. Nitrogen leaches very readily from our sandy soils unless we have slow release forms. Even the organic sources of nitrogen don't last very long in our tropical climate, but that's a very nitrogen deficient Areca palm. Not only do you see yellowing, but you see smaller than normal development of the new fronds. Here is nitrogen deficiency in royal palm. The poor thing's trying to grow, but it just doesn't have enough nitrogen to put out a proper frond up in the spear part of the frond here. This is in Naples, and this is also in Naples. This is a nitrogen deficient Montgomery palm, where you get very severe yellowing and then stunting in the development of the new leaves. And that's a pretty big problem. Basically, what you do in these situations, get some fertilizer out there, get some good quality granular fertilizer on there. You can drench or deep root feed as well, but usually a better long-term solution is just put some nitrogen on there. Here's nitrogen deficiency in fishtail palm. Again, this is a very severe deficiency, almost totally lacking in chlorophyll and growth. Now, the slide on the right, I want to spend a moment on. I believe that palms, after a while, get big enough and you don't really need them to grow anymore. This is a shot in Miami Beach, and you notice the 4 or 5 palms on the right side of the slide. Those are quite large. I don't see why they need to grow anymore. I would not be putting nitrogen fertilizer on those palms. The only one that I might give a little nitrogen to is the second one from the left to kind of balance it out. The other thing about royal palm roots is they venture out 20 or 30 feet. So these palms are getting nitrogen from the turf fertilizer. So I absolutely would not be putting, at least certainly, nitrogen fertilizer on these royal palms. They're big enough. What will we gain with 10 more feet? More susceptibility to storm damage? I kind of think so. Phosphorus, I don't know what phosphorus deficiency looks like in palm trees. This is the crop that you think it is. This is from a perfectly legal farm in the central part of the state. That's what phosphorus deficiency looks like in most plants. It's a purpling in the sort of older leaves. You saw this on Viburnum odoratissimum in the last talk. You also saw it on Ixora nora grant. But I don't think I've ever seen this particular symptom on palms. One of Tim Brochat's last publications indicated that palms really don't respond much to phosphorus. So I'm going to kind of skip over this. Let's go to the third number, potassium. Remember I told you in the last lecture that, well, I didn't tell you this, but potassium has over 200 functions in plants. One of the most important is it regulates the ability to close the stomates. Well, here again, you have sort of regularly sized and regularly distanced necrotic spots in the older leaves. If you look at a new leaf there or a new leaf there, you've got perfectly good color and you've got no necrotic spots. That's potassium deficiency. It's not fungal. This is actually both potassium and magnesium deficiency in a Phoenix sylvestris. Generally, with lack of magnesium, you get yellow or orange color. Lack of potassium, you'll get necrotic spots like you see over here, and you also get leaf tip burn. This is quite common in South Florida soils. Here's some closer up images of that. This is an Adenidia palm. Once again, same pattern. The older leaves have a lot of relatively equally sized and equally spaced necrotic spots. If you can see in the upper left-hand corner of this slide, that's a new leaf. It's perfectly normal, no spots. Rhaphis excelsa, okay, just good old-fashioned lady palm. In the older leaves, you have all these regularly shaped and spaced necrotic spots. I didn't really get much of it in there, but that's a newer leaf in the upper left-hand corner, and so is that. They don't have the spots on them. That's how you tell if it's a leaf spot disease versus a potassium deficiency. The problem when you get into this kind of situation is you can put all the potassium you want on there, but these spots are necrotic. You're not going to get them to heal or recover. You've just got to grow on past it with proper nutrition. There's potassium deficiency in a Chinese fan palm. That is in a container, but you see not only some necrotic spots, but you see some tip burn there. Drought stress was actually part of this diagnosis. Pencil necking in palms really results from premature shedding of older fronds. And a lot of that is related to potassium nutrition. When a palm runs low on something, it's only got one bud. It's only got one growing point. and it must nourish, and protect that growing point. If it loses that growing point, the game's over. And potassium is one of the main elements that causes premature shedding to happen. The plant is stealing nutrients from the old leaves. It's cannibalizing itself. Notice another thing here. When this palm was in a tree farm, the rings on the trunk, which are the old leaf scars, were quite well spaced. Since this plant has been put in the landscape, you see the leaf scars or rings are very much closer together. This was a development that was having economic problems, and they really didn't fertilize for about 3 years. So that's why a lot of this stuff is penciling. I think that palm can be saved, but it's touch and go. Montgomery palm with both nitrogen and potassium at the same time. Understand that in trees, shrubs, palms, most plants, multiple deficiencies are actually pretty common. And that makes the diagnostic process a little trickier because, right, if it's deficient in this, it looks like this. If it's deficient in that, it looks like that. What if it's deficient in both? What does that look like? Well, this is a Montgomery palm in, I don't remember where it is. This is a Washingtonia, I believe, in possibly California. I think it was San Diego, maybe. And you see it's probably magnesium deficient. It's got a lot of necrotic spots, which is probably potassium deficiency. This thing's deficient in just about everything. Here's Bismarckia in Aventura, Williams Island. You see how lack of chlorophyll in the older leaves and good color in the new leaves, just like I showed you in the, the hardwood tree slides in the previous lecture. Bismarckias don't do this all that often, but they do it sometimes. And the soils in Aventura, Williams Island are really, really high in calcium. This is a couple Robolinis in Palm Beach. Again, you've got yellow to orange color in the old leaves. Once again, the tree is stealing magnesium from the old leaves, moving it to the new leaves, which look normal. You have a lack of magnesium, therefore a lack of chlorophyll in the older leaves. Cat palms have pretty low magnesium requirements, but here's a little bit of magnesium deficiency in cat palms. Our old friend Henry Donselman introduced both the cat palm and the majesty palm to the landscape trade in the 1980s, and I sure miss Henry. Areca palms have very common problems with magnesium deficiency. That's why they're orange all the time, and especially in ones that are not that well looked after and tended to and fertilized. Those older leaves would tend to turn orange to yellow to brown, while the new leaves look just fine. Okay, palm magnesium requirements. If you want to shoot a shot of this slide, you might want to. It's a lot of writing, but high requirements, any of the phoenix palms, the queen palms, foxtails, arecas, bismarcks, fishtails, coconuts, parotis, pindo, bottles, thatch palms, Fiji Island fan palms, or Pichardia pacifica, Pichardia thurstonii, they have pretty high magnesium requirements. Low magnesium requirements, Adenidias, Washingtonias, sables, royal palms, Chinese fan, Camidorias, it's not Chamaedorea, it's Camidoria, Cocothrinax, windmills, European fan palms, Latanias, and Buccaneer. I'll just talk for a second about the first two. Adenidias are native to very calcareous areas in the Philippines, which is why you virtually never see magnesium deficiency in Adenidias. Sorry. Washingtonias are native to southwestern Mexico, where again, the soils are very alkaline and calcareous. So you rarely see magnesium deficiency in a Washingtonia. You will see it sometimes in sable palmetto, our state tree. It's not that common, but it does happen. Magnesium and potassium deficiency together often happen. Here's a fishtail with both. This marginal yellowing, in the older leaf here is lack of magnesium. And once again, broken record, the evenly spaced, evenly sized necrotic spots in the old leaf, look a bit different. The new leaf looks perfectly fine, not a spot on it. This is a foxtail in Golden Beach. It's deficient in both potassium and magnesium. I keep trying to get these guys to put more magnesium and potassium on there, and they do once in a while, but you see they're still pretty deficient. And once again, in the upper right-hand corner of that image, the color's good. It's fine. We just need to, fix that. Okay, correcting magnesium and potassium deficiencies. Once again, I'm a big fan of K-Mag. It's a natural organic 0022 with 11% magnesium. I met a rich guy one day playing polo, and he was asking me about fertilizer. I was recommending K-Mag on his grass, and he laughed and said, "I own all the K-Mag mines." No wonder he's a rich guy. I'm making him richer. Anyway, again, as a common ingredient in most fertilizers, naturally mined in New Mexico. It comes in fine and coarse grades. I prefer the coarse. It's a little slower acting, but it lasts longer, especially in the rainy season. There's also a polyon-coated 5 to 6 month K-Mag if labor is limiting or you can't get to certain locations often enough. There is a 5 to 6 month polyon-coated K-Mag if you like to go that route. It costs a bit more, but there's less labor to put it out. K-Mag is also the exact same thing as Sulpomag. Sulpomag stands for sulfate of potash magnesia. The K in K-Mag refers to potassium, so it's potassium magnesium is kind of the nickname for it. Now, if you put K-Mag on a palm, it takes a while to work. There is no quick fix. When you've got a potassium or magnesium deficient palm, that palm is cannibalizing those older leaves, taking them from the old leaves again, moving them up top to the new leaves. And when you put K-Mag on a deficient palm like that, the palm is not putting that potassium and magnesium into those older leaves. Those older leaves are already being cannibalized. It's going to go up to the middle and the new leaves. And as those leaves get pumped up with potassium and magnesium, as they age and become the middle and the older leaves, then you get the response. I explain that to people because I don't want them to do it once and say, that didn't work. I'm not doing that again. Okay. I like to put K-Mag on every 2 to 3 months. If you're dry fertilizing pretty intensively, do it in between your fertilizer applications. Usually a good rule of thumb, 1 cup for a small palm like a Rovolini, about 2 cups for a medium palm like a fishtail, 3 cups for a large palm like a coconut or a Washingtonia or a big date palm, something like that. And you don't have to get out there with a scale and weigh stuff. Nobody does that anyway, so you can just do it by cups. But again, the first time you do it, you're likely not going to receive a response. It's usually the 2nd to 3rd application where you start seeing better color in the older leaves. The older leaves don't get cannibalized, and you start to see a fuller head on the palms. What do we really want from a palm tree? We want good green color and a nice, full, tropical looking head. Well, this is one of the ways to do that. And again, there is no quick fix. Once a palm gets deficient, palms don't do much of anything fast. And so if they get deficient, it's going to take a while to repair it. I normally tell homeowner types or landscape types 6 to 9 months, maybe as long as a year, but typically 6 to 9 months to make the tree look better. Usually after 2 to 3 months, you'll see they're getting better, but the full response takes a bit longer than that. Sodium toxicity, this is at the Fontainebleau where they got a lot of windy, salty weather. Why they put a poor Laquala palm there, I don't know. Those things only put out 1 or 2 fronds a year anyway. This is in Aventura on a cat palm where their water goes salty every spring about this time of year. And this is just wicked sodium toxicity. The plant's taking up sodium instead of potassium. That's another thing about potassium and sodium. If the soil is deficient in potassium, the plant will tend to take up sodium instead because it needs it as an electrolyte. So not having enough potassium aggravates the sodium toxicity. Okay, iron deficiency. This is in Dade County. You see the royal palms are nice and green, those 2 guys right there. You know, they're native to here. They handle, you know, our pH and our soil conditions pretty well. There's a foxtail, which is native to Australia. There's another foxtail, which is also native to Australia. But you ever notice you'll see a landscape and there'll be maybe 20 foxtails and maybe 18 of them will look good like this. And 2 or 3 of them will be legal pad yellow. It's a soil condition problem. When the pH of a soil with a foxtail is above 7.7, you're gonna have problems like this. They're gonna turn yellow. They're going to struggle from iron deficiency. They're going to struggle from magnesium deficiency. There have been times when I've advised landscapers, come in and dig this palm out as if you were going to harvest it. But before you take it out of the ground, put some better, more acidic soil back in it. And then after a while, it'll root into that better soil and it'll green up. You know, the better looking foxtails look like this. Now, these two palms on the right were very deficient. As you can see, this guy on the left is pretty yellow, but they've done some drenches with some micronutrients and some NPK, and now you're starting to see good forming spears. One of the things I look for when I'm evaluating palm health is, are there spears? If there are spears, it means the root system is functioning and it's healthy and it's starting to put out growth. A palm will not put out growth unless it has the root system to support it. Secondly, is the pear strong? Is it forming fully? You know, those are some of the signs I look for. Things like this tell you what the fertility used to be like. Spear leaves tell you what it's like now. There's an Alexander palm with iron deficiency. Actually, he's also got potassium deficiency at the same time. You get a veiny chlorosis in the older leaves. This is a Rufus palm, and one of Rufus's favorite things to do is get iron deficiency. I think in containers, they like a pH about 5.2 or less, and we can never supply that. So Rufus palms have a lot of iron deficiency, especially if they've been in the pot a long time where the soil mix is broken down and there's no air in it and it doesn't drain. You get a lot of iron deficiency, and I'll show you another slide of that in just a second. Yep, there you go. There's that wicked iron deficiency where the leaf basically turns almost white. There is no chlorophyll being made because the plant can't take up any available iron. These on the right side of this slide are the green dots of absorption I showed you about in a slide in the previous talk. Rufus are terrible at absorbing foliar iron. Here was an iron application that had some degree of success. Once again, you see a droplet pattern where the droplet sat there for a while, the leaf was wet, and some of the nutrients were able to be absorbed. Plants do absorb nutrients through their leaves, but only while the spray is wet. Once the spray has dried on the leaf, absorption no longer takes place until the leaf is re-moistened by irrigation or rainfall or fog or dew. But to get Rufus to green up, you've really got to go through the soil. Manganese deficiency, once again, Mn, N for new. The one on the left, I think, is in Southwest Broward. The one on the right, I took in Palm Beach or Lost Tree Village. See how little and stubby the new leaves are in both of these palms? It looks like somebody sat on the palm. That is manganese deficiency. Again, I would be coming in and drenching with probably a pound or two of manganese sulfate. I might put something acidic like ammonium sulfate or 2177 in there. I've analyzed the soils in both of these locations and they're alkaline as all get out. And that's why these very expensive palms and very expensive homes have stubby new leaves. Now, the problem is, if we correct this manganese deficiency and this manganese deficiency, I can't make these leaves expand fully. What's going to happen is the new leaves are going to come out and be normal size like these. That leaf's about, what, 8 feet long? That leaf's about 2.5 feet long. I can't fix it at this point. I can make the new leaves come out, but for a while, the palm's going to look kind of funny. But you've got to correct it. You know, manganese deficiency is ultimately fatal in many palms. Here's manganese deficiency in a couple of royals. And you can see they're kind of not only frizzled, but the leaf expansion is really terrible. You know, a royal palm frond is what, 10, 12 feet or more sometimes. And these are just really bad. That one's also starting to pencil. Okay, correcting manganese deficiency. Here is a Robellini at a lady's house in Naples in a development I do. And you see all the withering and the frizzling in most of these fronds. That is what manganese deficiency looks like in Robellini. Magnesium deficiency gives you yellow and orange color in the older leaves, which I don't see here. But about a month before maybe 2 months before I took this picture, see how this leaf is coming out normal? And the one behind it is also coming out normal. We're starting to get the deficiency corrected. There is still a little bit of withering there, but it's generally forming a lot better. I can't unfrizzle a frizzled leaf. I just can't do it. Here's a palm not far from my house where we have both manganese and magnesium deficiency. I drive by these two palms. There's two of them all the time. Yellowing in the older leaves, magnesium, Mg ground. The top of it looks like somebody sat on it. That's manganese deficiency, okay? You can certainly drench this palm with both manganese sulfate and magnesium sulfate. And I would hit it pretty hard. These soils are pretty poor where this palm is. And obviously they are because they obviously don't have good nutrition going on. Copper deficiency is pretty rare. This is sable minor in Lake Wales. It tends to only happen in organic soils. I've seen copper deficiency rarely in my career. I did see some copper deficient Robollinis in a muck field in the Glades, probably 35 years ago. I have a picture of it somewhere, but I don't know where right now. But generally just one spray of something copper sulfate, Coside, Champ, you know, any old kind of copper, usually one shot will take care of it. The copper deficiency is quite rare. You're not likely at all to see this, you know, in a sandy soil or a sandy situation. Boron deficiency, I'm going to talk about for a good bit. Boron deficiency starts out as you see the little tips of the frontlets there, or technically the pinnae. They're starting to fold back like you fold your hand back, you know, your fingers back on your hand. That's the early symptom of boron deficiency. It can get quite a bit worse than that sometimes. Here is a palm with a rather severe boron deficiency. Eventually they start to grow sideways and even downward. And this is another shot I took in Naples. I think that's a royal. I can't quite see from my screen, but believe it or not, you can fix this. You can fix this palm and make it survive. And I'll explain that a little more in a moment. Once again, boron is the only micronutrient that leaches. Iron doesn't leach, copper doesn't leach, manganese doesn't leach, zinc doesn't leach, molybdenum doesn't even leach, but boron does. Boron is the only non-metallic micronutrient. All of the others are metals. It's the only micronutrient that tends to be anionic in soil, therefore cation exchange capacity really doesn't matter. What does boron do in plants? It's involved in translocation and utilization of carbohydrates. That's a fancy way of saying that boron helps the plant make sugars and move them around. When a plant doesn't have enough boron, it can't make the sugars and carbohydrates properly to make a leaf form properly, and therefore a leaf comes out deformed. There is boron deficiency in a queen palm. Look at that little stub there. That leaf's not going to get much bigger than that, whereas these leaves are probably, you know, 8 feet long. There is boron deficiency in a royal palm. Now you might say, well, how do I know that's not manganese deficiency? It's frizzled. The answer is it's probably deficient in both. And if I were looking after especially this palm, I would be drenching it with both boron and manganese sulfate. This one I'd probably do the same, although I'm quite sure that this is just boron deficiency. There is a boron deficient triangle palm. You don't see that many triangle palms in the landscape anymore. And you certainly don't see them that boron deficient. But again, the leaflets are folding back on themselves to varying degrees. And it looks to me like this bud is starting to grow sideways. It's starting to grow left from your image on the screen. And if not corrected, that palm could well grow sideways and then downward, and it could well eventually die. I'm seeing a lot more boron deficiency, I think, in South Florida landscapes because last year was such a wet year. We normally get 55 to 60 inches of rain. In most places, we got 70 last year, and that's leaching your boron away. This is sable minor, again, in Lake Wales, and it's having trouble pulling fronds properly. And look at this leaf here. It's really having trouble too. We applied boron to this palm, and now, excuse me, it's coming out of it. The fronds are starting to form more normally, but that leaf was really deformed. And then this leaf, the leaf facing to the left sort of was really deformed. The leaf facing to the right is somewhat deformed, but now it's on its way out of there. Coconut, this I took in Loxahatchee. You see the leaf tip curl. The leaves are again folding back on themselves. Coconuts don't do this that frequently, but they will do it. This I took on a Majesty palm, I believe in Hawaii. And again, the classic leaflets folding in on themselves there and there and there, especially. And there again is your first sign. Now, when you correct a boron deficiency, you're not going to unfold those leaves. A distorted or deformed leaf is going to stay a deformed leaf. You can't undeform it no matter what you do. But that should be your first sign. So when you're looking at palm canopies, especially on Montgomery's, they do it quite commonly. You know, most any palm can do this, but look and see if the leaf, Royals will do it. The leaflets folding back on themselves like that. That's your early symptom and gives you enough time to fix it. That's not a great slide, but that's an Adenidia palm with boron deficiency. The leaflets are not forming correctly. And in here and sort of the middle of that emerging frond, it's kind of sticking together and not opening properly. Again, it doesn't have the sugars and the carbohydrates to fully form the leaf. I mentioned Montgomery a second ago. Montgomerys do this all the time. And they're a really good palm and I really like them, but you got to watch out for boron deficiency on this palm. A typical palm fertilizer, a granular fertilizer, should have 0.03 to 0.04% boron in it. 0.02 may not be enough, especially in the rainy season, but 0.03 to 0.04 and a decent palm fertilizer is pretty essential. Again, here's a Montgomery. This is a less severe deficiency, but you can see right in here the leaflets filling back on themselves. Vicia winans, this is not a great slide, but there are leaflets folding back on themselves here. This is, I think, at Bradley Park in Palm Beach, but there is boron deficiency in here. So you see, it's pretty common. I didn't have a lot of trouble, you know, finding these deficiencies. Here's an Alexander palm. This is in Loxahatchee in a tree farm. And we had this problem with these palms last year. We treated them. They started coming out normally like this frond and this frond. You see a little potassium deficiency there too. But with all the rain we had last year, now they're starting to come out a little distorted and deformed. We put boron on this tree in the form of borax. This was the previously deficient leaf. This leaf is coming better and forming better. And I think this frond may be almost normal. If it doesn't come normal, the next one will. And this is a bottle palm with early symptoms of boron deficiency. You often see bottle palms when the new frond comes out and it just kind of grows sideways. You see that all the time, and that's a sign of boron deficiency in bottles. And the problem with bottle palms, Hyophorbe lagenicaulis, is that they only put out 1 to 1.5 fronds a year. So once you get that deficient, it really takes a long time to correct that because they grow so slowly. No matter how much fertilizer you put on a bottle palm, it can only grow so fast. They're beautiful, lovely palms. They're very popular. But on a bottle, you got to watch your magnesium, you got to watch your potassium, you got to watch your boron and make sure that those are consistently supplied. All right, bad boron deficiency. Look at that stubby little leaf on that poor little Bismarck. Okay, you know, you see what you see what the previous fronds were. They formed normally and were the normal size of a Bismarck. This one is short and stubby. And this one is really stubby, and I don't know if he's ever going to form unless somebody gets some boron to him pretty quickly. And this is a queen palm I shot at the Redland Elementary School in Homestead. He has obviously been very boron deficient for a long time. He's almost growing downward. Believe it or not, you can fix that palm and make him survive and normalize eventually. But, you know, elementary schools don't always have the budget to be great at fertilizing their palm trees. So that's how things can get pretty bad. Here is, I guess that's an Alexander, kind of growing sideways. Here is a Montgomery with rather severe boron deficiency. Again, the early symptom is just a little bit of folding back, and as it gets worse, they just have trouble forming a frond, period. They just don't have the carbohydrate reserves to fill out those fronds and make a proper frond. The solution, again, is 20 multein borax. We talked about it last time. Borax is cheap. It's 11% boron. You can get it in pretty much any grocery store in the laundry detergent section. Generally, I recommend a half teaspoon of boron on a palm about every 6 months. People tend to want to do more. They don't think they're putting enough on, but really half a teaspoon is enough. The only time I might go a level teaspoon, and I emphasize a level teaspoon, is if it's like a great big royal or something where you might need a little more substance, but be conservative with boron. It's not something you can get cute with. Okay, multiple deficiencies. Sometimes palms are in such poor conditions that they just become deficient in about everything. This is a royal. I forget where I took this, but you know, if I were to run a leaf analysis on this tissue, I'd probably find not much of nothing. He's really struggling. This is a Dactylifera in Aventura. There were 6 of these in this planting. I made some recommendations last year. 4 of them have totally recovered. The 5th one is on its way back, and I have a bet with the landscape company owner for a good bottle of wine that I can bring this one back to. It's going to be touch and go because he's been real deficient for a long time. But what I see here is a really terribly formed leaf, a terribly formed leaf, a terribly formed leaf, and then a little bit of action up top. And if I can keep that going, maybe I can bring this tree out, although it's going to be a year probably before I get to enjoy my bottle of wine from my friend in our bet, but it'll be aged another year by that time. Fluoride toxicity. Not many palms seem to be fluoride sensitive. There was a publication in the 1980s that said that areca palms are a little bit sensitive to fluoride. You get fluoride primarily in irrigation water, phosphate fertilizers, and perlite that's not leached. Fluoride accumulates in leaf tips and margins. Like potassium deficiency, fluoride toxicity prevents the plant from closing the stomates. That's why you have tip burn right here. And that's why you have these little necrotic spots here. But these are only in the tips of the older leaves. You can kind of see in this leaf, there is no problem. Fluoride toxicity is very common in rhapis palms in interior scapes. The reason is that most municipalities fluoridate their water at 1 part per million fluoride. Anything above 0.25 parts per million fluoride is too much for fluoride sensitive plants. Other fluoride sensitive plants include cordylands and Easter lilies and Janet Craig's. Most anything in the Easter lily family is fluoride sensitive, but rhapis palms are sensitive to fluoride. You guys in landscape inspection probably don't deal with this much because the way you deal with fluoride is with calcium. Calcium fluoride is insoluble. Your teeth are primarily made from calcium fluoride, so you tie up the fluoride with calcium. And in fact, that's what I told this nursery to do. Again, when you have tip burn or necrosis, you can't undo that. All you can do is fix the fundamental problem and then grow the palm out of it. A couple things that are not nutrient deficiencies, then I'll take a few questions. That's royal palm bug on the left. Royal palm bug injury tends to happen about now. So most people treat with imidacloprid or safari usually in March. If they miss that, royal palm bug will tear up royal palm fronds pretty well. That's royal palm bug damage there, and that is royal palm damage there. This is lethal bronzing, used to be called Texas Phoenix palm decline. This disease is running all over the state. You probably know it's spread by a leafhopper. Used to be called Mindus crudis. They've changed the name of it, and I don't remember what the new genus is, but the leafhoppers live in the grass. They spread the phytoplasmas around, and in 3 or 4 months, Sylvesters are dead. I have said for a couple of years now, I don't think this palm's going to be in the trade very much longer. It's a very nice palm, but it's just so susceptible to lethal bronzing that, you know, you really, if anybody's going to have this palm in their landscape, they really need to be injecting them with oxytetracycline. So to summarize, before I take a few questions, nutrient deficiencies, as you have seen today, are very common in South Florida palms. Which palms get which deficiencies are governed by the soil conditions in which they are planted and the soil conditions to which they are adapted in their native habitat. That's why certain things like sables and royals, I'm not a native plant nut, but because they're native to here, they tend to have fewer deficiencies than some of the exotics. Although things like adenidias, which are native to the Philippines, you know, they're used to similar conditions from what we have here. Landscape palms do not absorb foliar nutrients very well. Do you really want to be spraying a 60-foot royal with nutrients or a big old dactylifera? You know, not really. And even a small palm like a Robolini or a Adenidia or something small like that, a bottle, they just don't absorb foliar very well. Their deficiencies are best corrected by top dressing with nutritional supplements, or better yet, by soil drenching or deep root feeding. If your soil is really poor and really alkaline where you're trying to do this, you may well have to do it 2 to 3 times. Again, palms don't do much of anything very quickly, so these deficiencies come on rather slowly and they are corrected very slowly, but I hope I've shown you today a little bit on how to diagnose them and what to do about them. Thank you, guys. I think we have 14 minutes for questions if anybody has any.
Lynn,
fantastic.
Thank you. That was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And yes, we do have some questions rolling in. First one comes from Henry Mayer and it has to do with the coloring. Why, like on Ixora, you get the red, the telltale sign would be a red blotch as opposed to other nutrient deficiencies or more standard yellow, yellow streaking. You know, what is it with the different nutrients that cause the different colors and the different patterns on the fronds?
Very good question. Hello, Henry. It really comes down to biochemistry. And I don't like to talk too much about biochemistry because people's eyes tend to glaze over. But if you're seeing red blotches or red pigment, you're really seeing the secondary anthocyanin pigments that are generally made with iron. If you don't have adequate chlorophyll, then you tend to see the secondary pigments. Just like when the leaves change in the fall up north, the plants are no longer making chlorophyll, and then you see the yellow and orange and the red underneath. So it comes down to the biochemistry within the plant. The plant's not making chlorophyll correctly. Part of that's a temperature thing. When Ixoras get below about 45 degrees in the wintertime, they don't make chlorophyll well. And that's why you see that red color primarily in the older leaves. In Norogrants, once again, you can spray monopotassium phosphate, or you can spray 20/20 and the new leaves will come out normal, but the older leaves will not correct. It's all about making chlorophyll.
Excellent, excellent. And Thad kind of has a similar one that plays off that.
I don't want to talk to him. How you doing, my old friend? Been a long time.
Thad fortunately is at a place where they have a good fertilizer budget, but he still is running into some problems. So he was wondering what a good granular preventative program for dwarf Ixoras are. He's using, I believe he said the 8212, the Brochat Special, which is pricier than most people are gonna be using, and still having some issues.
Yeah, I believe Tim likes to keep the nitrogen low because he believed that pushing more growth with more nitrogen aggravates deficiencies. And to some degree, I agree with that. Thad, I'd probably be doing, you know, if budgets handle it, A212 is fine. It is, in some cases, double the price of some things. You could do 12-6-8 or 13-3-13. But I really think that some foliar 20/20 now and then is important. Also, if you go into winter with your Ixoras chlorotic, they generally don't green up until about now. You always hear about iron deficiency in Ixora, but I'm telling you from experience that manganese deficiency is just as common. So about Labor Day to Halloween, I'd like to be spraying some minors on there, just trying to get them into the plant while the weather's still warm. But I'd go 13-3-13 or 12-6-8, but I do foliar NPK and minors when the weather's good.
Excellent, excellent. Next one, Dr. Brochat, speaking of which, said one time at a conference that Washingtonias will lose their leaves naturally if they're properly fed. You got any input on that or opinion on that?
Yeah, I think so. Again, they're native to southwestern Mexico, where they don't have much fertility. Nobody's out there fertilizing in the desert. It doesn't rain much, and you know, I can't disagree with that. They will shed their leaves out pretty well, whether they are well fed or not. They take low fertility pretty well. Although I was in Texas 3 weeks ago and they don't take 9 degrees very well, I can tell you that.
Because, with Washingtonians, they get so tall and they, that quote grass skirt has always seemed to be a part of it. So that's what caught our attention is when Dr. Brochop said, no, that they should lose them. And of course, for Tim, most everything is potassium. So I think he was probably blaming the deficiency on potassium. But if that were the case, or overstimulation with potassium or something, could cause those washies, once they start getting out of the reach of ladders and buckets and high reaches, to have those fronds come off more easily. That would be a big plus.
I know that in California and Arizona and places like that, the skirts are often much longer, to the point that the kids like to set them on fire just for a thrill. I hope the kids around here never learn that. I can't disagree with that. And Washingtonia is a palm that doesn't, in my view, require a lot of fertilizer because they get so tall so too soon. And it was actually myself and Monica Elliott that first discovered Fusarium wilt on Washingtonia in Orlando.
All right. Next question is your preference for either one, both, or how it would go? Tissue samples versus soil samples.
If I could just do one, I'd do tissue. But they're both useful. To me, a soil sample is sort of a snapshot of the current fertility status and pH in a soil. A tissue sample is more like a video showing you a little longer term view of what the fertility is like and what's getting into a plant. Both together are really the most useful, and soil and plant testing is not very expensive. That's why I'm not in that business anymore. But but again, the problem is if you got a 50-foot Washingtonia, you're going to go get a leaf sample or a royal. You're not.
Yeah. Oh. So the tissue sample, obviously, on any, it doesn't matter if it's grass or palm or what, needs to be green, healthy tissue. Is it better to have it? Because I remember from when I was dealing with you back with Max, when we were taking them off golf courses, you always said make sure you get the newest growth.
Well, that's partly true. In turf grass, I would agree with that. That's me at the Dolphin Stadium, by the way, in that picture, in that slide. They called me 2 weeks ago with an emergency call, and I was very proud that I was the first guy they called. But in most plants, you want to take the most recent fully matured leaf. And I'm talking about a tree or a shrub. You don't want to take the brand new leaves. Those are like a 13-year-old girl. They're still in development. You don't want to take the old leaves because that'll tell you what the nutritional status was like a year ago. You want the newest leaf on the branch that is fully sized and fully hardened and fully formed. You want to take a good handful of that tissue and send it off to your lab. So not the brand new tissue, but the most recent fully matured. In the case of palms, if it's a pinnate palm, you want to take the central pinnae or leaflets from the most fully matured leaf. On a fan palm, you generally sample the entire frond. Again, most recent fully matured.
Okay, when the Dolphins called, were you able to resolve the quarterback controversy, I hope?
I was their turf consultant for 4 years, and people used to ask me, can you fix the team?
Blame it on the grass. The next one was a question about lethal bronzing. And now you alluded to that a little bit a minute ago, but what do you see? What's the future with this? How badly is it going to impact our industry?
Well, Sylvester's Tree Farms is out of business. What did that tell you? Poor guys. They were good guys, and they went out of business from what I hear. But if you're in the in the Sylvestris business, you got to be injecting them. If you don't, you're taking a huge risk. It bothers the other Phoenix palms, but not quite as much. Some of the tree farmers spray for the leaf hopper. I used to work with Randy McCoy in the 80s, who did a lot of the original leaf yellowing research with Mindus crudis. And I, in fact, shared an office with him for a while. But, you know, most palms, you're going to be fine. But if you've got, you know, I mean, Sylvestris is a really nice palm. I really like them, and most people do too. They're popular. You know, they look like a desert palm, but they're not. They're native to India. Sylvestris means from the woods. And I just don't have a lot of faith that that palm is going to be in the industry a whole lot longer, unless you've got a higher end community that doesn't mind paying the money to inject them. I will tell you that a lot more pest control companies now are doing oxytetracycline injections. Dr. Bader, I believe, is still saying 4 times per year. Some of the pest control guys are telling me, and I don't know if they're right or not, that if you shoot it real good with a high dosage of OTC, you can get by with about 3 times a year. It's not super expensive to do, but you know, it's an extra added, you know, problem.
Well, and as you well know, it's almost like a preventative herbicide or something. You're putting it on. How do you really know if you're preventing it? Okay, if you get it, you know it didn't work. But how long, you know, how long do you persist at 4 times a year? And a lot of problems that management and even residents at these high-end places have is if you're going to do that 4 times a year, in a year or two, it looks like the palm was involved in a drive-by shooting. You know.
Yes, it does. That is a problem. That is a true problem. For any of you who may not know, you know, the first symptom is generally the inflorescence dies, and date palms are generally flowering and fruiting in about February and March. And if your flower and fruit stalks die, that's a bad sign. I carry around a portable, you know, drill with me in the 18-inch 5/8 drill bit that you're supposed to, you know, drill out. And I send them to Erica, you know, over at the research center. And, you know, you got to sterilize it and everything. But I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on our industry as a whole, but I wouldn't want to, you know, I'm telling my nursery clients, don't plant any more Sylvestris. If you've got them already, finish them up and sell them, but don't plant any more.
Wow. Wow. Well, then again,
I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, a lot of people do, but you rarely, as long as I've known you, I'm certainly not gonna, I'm not gonna call that one. I would, I'd take the bet on your side. Lynn, the thank yous are rolling in from all kinds of people. Extremely well received, again, as expected and as delivered. We truly appreciate all you're doing for LIAF and the green industry. Really, really keep it up. If there's anything we can ever do for you, please check in with us.
Thanks very much, y'all. Happy Easter, happy Passover to everyone.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
To the rest of the association, in the final 2 minutes we've got left, there's a couple quick announcements. Henry has a couple upcoming educational sessions that I believe I know you can look on the LIAF website, and then he sent out some emails if you want to, and there were some really good CEUs available for the GIBMP, which I know a lot of us have had, but you can take that class without necessarily applying for the license, et cetera, and you can still get some of the CEUs that I see out there. And then there is also one on grading palms with John Conroy that's upcoming next week. We do ask that you go to our website, the LIAF website, and you can just Google or put in the initials LIAF, and right past Long Island Alzheimer's Federation and now the London International Animation Festival. We're there.
Fabulous.
We're there. So we want to drive that there. Richard is in charge of it. That is a well done website with a lot of information that you will find beneficial to you. Besides that, I will tell you have a good month. We will have another meeting later in April. I want to remind you one more time, please pay your dues so we can keep this association going forward. And any questions or problems or issues you have, feel free to reach out to us via the website or directly at any of our places of business. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of this past month and the future month. All right. Take care all. Bye.